welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, episode number 303, 303, 303, something like that, for the 10th of August 2014. Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia. On this week's episode, we're going to be looking, remembering, considering, reviewing, going over the $1 Million Challenge at the recent amazing meeting in Las Vegas, where I helped, did my bit to put that together. And I'll be reading my official report that I wrote a little while ago for the James Randi Educational Foundation, all about the $1 Million Challenge, testing somebody who said that they had mystical energy coming out of their hand. Following that, it's a week in science from the Royal Institution of Australia. And then it's Evidence Please with Jo Alabaster. Jo was at Skeptics in the pub the other night where I was giving a talk about the $1 Million Challenge. And after my talk, she was asking pubgoers what they thought of the whole concept of the $1 Million Challenge, or in the case of Australia, our $100,000 challenge. Amongst other people Jo chats to is the chief investigator for Australian Skeptics, Ian Bryce, and the editor of the Skeptic magazine, Tim Mendham. Then to round off the show, it's a grain of salt with Eran Segev, yet more interviews from QED, the Question, Explore, Discover conference in Manchester. I was there last year and the year before at QED. Wow, what a fabulous convention that was. Really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it. Those skeptics from the Liverpool area and the Manchester area, they sure know how to put on a good convention. This week, Eran chats to Dr. Elizabeth Pisani about HIV and AIDS and her thoughts on the current state of HIV and AIDS. And you'll appreciate when you hear the interview why I'm not saying HIV/AIDS, I'm saying HIV and AIDS. And also her thoughts on circumcision. There's an interesting one for you, a bit different. That's a grain of salt with Eran Segev to wind up the Skeptic Zone this week. Thank you to all those people sending in your interesting entries to our Cosmos competition. Those people in Australia. Australian listeners, you have until the night of the 16th, midnight on the 16th of this month, that's Saturday night, to send me via Cosmos at skepticzone.tv a picture with the theme Billions and Billions. How you interpret that is entirely up to you. And our judge, or somebody, will have a look at all those entries, and the winner will receive the new Cosmos series on DVD, which I have right here in my shelf somewhere. What's this? Star Wars? No. Superman, The Producers, A Hard Day's Night. I know I put it up here somewhere. Maybe it's on this side. Let's have a look. There's my books. James Randi. What's this? Conjuring, The Mask of Nostradamus. Up here, maybe. Brian Brushwood, Bizarre Magic. Good heavens. Whatever. I must really... here it is. Here it is, right next to Adventures in Paranormal Investigation. Who wrote that? Joe Nichol. Oh, there you go. Cosmos, A Space-Time Odyssey. 4-disc set. The new series, folks. The new series on DVD can be yours if you live in Australia and if you enter the Cosmos Billions and Billions competition. Don't forget, send your photograph to Cosmos at skepticzone.tv. And some of the entries that are coming in we've put up on our Facebook, the Skeptic Zone Facebook site, which is not used to the extent it should be, really. But I notice our reporter Jo Alabaster has been attempting to sort of get more things happening with that. Anyway, check it out, and if you want to, please enter our competition, and I'll announce the winner next week, who will get this lovely Cosmos disc set. But that's all for me at the moment. I'm going to run downstairs. I'm going to open up the cupboard. Licorice. Salty licorice. European like style, Dutch type, Swedish type, salty licorice type, Norwegian, or I think you get the idea. Very nice. Well, I'm doing that. I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. The amazing meeting, the annual gathering of the James Randi Educational Foundation, JREF, in Las Vegas is amazing for a number of reasons. I, for one, find it amazing that although a whole year goes by from one meeting to the next, once ensconced in the venue, the South Point Casino and Spa, one can be forgiven for thinking that the last meeting was only a couple of weeks ago. In the 6 years I've been going to the South Point, it has scarcely changed while I just get a little older. In 2012 and 2013, it was my pleasure to assist the JREF in organising and staging the preliminary test for the $1 Million Challenge, MDC, which over the years has become the grand finale of TAM. In 2014, shortly before heading off to Las Vegas, members of the MDC committee, Banachek, Jamie in Swiss and Chip Denman, asked if I would once again come to the aid of the party. With such highly regarded people as these acting on behalf of James Randi, the answer was easy. The emails started flowing my way a day or two before my arrival, followed by Skype meetings with Banachek and, new to the MDC, Kristen Lambert, a highly respected up-and-coming magician who works with the likes of Chris Angel. This year the claimant was one Mr. Fei Wong, a Chinese national living and studying in Boston. He had already been tested by the New England Center for the Advancement of Paranormal Science with seemingly positive results. This report, together with letters of recommendation, satisfied the MDC committee that it was worth proceeding with testing this claimant. Mr. Wong's claims, in his own words, is, "I have some supernatural power that I can send out from my right hand and other people can simply feel it at a distance of about 30 centimeters away." Mr. Wong claims that he can project or transmit a power, force or energy, hitherto unknown to science, from his right hand into the hand of a receptive subject. The subject will be able to feel this energy as warmth, movement, tingling, or some other notable sensations in their hand. It is also claimed that this energy, possibly known as Qigong, can be transmitted through various materials, including wood, plastic, and metal. It is important to note that this claimed ability still works, even if the subject is unaware of the direct actions of Mr. Wong. On the surface of it, this may appear to be a relatively simple test. Experience has shown us that even simple claims can be quite a task. I arrived at the South Point the day before the first official TAM events. Before long, I found myself in the Del Mar Bar, the unofficial TAM hangout spot, working on the formal $1 Million Challenge document that would not only serve as the agreement between the JREF and Mr. Wong, but would also be a step-by-step protocol for the test itself. This document would change many times each day as the committee and Mr. Wong worked together to fine-tune the test. The first hurdle to overcome was to make sure the subjects of the test, those who were on the receiving end of Mr. Wong's powers, were ultimately unaware of when Mr. Wong was sending his power. At first, the idea was to set up an aluminium partition on the table with the subject on one side and Mr. Wong on the other. There would be 2 holes in the partition through which the subject could extend their hands, coming to rest inside 2 boxes. Mr. Wong would then work on either the left or right hand, sending his energy through the box, without the subject knowing. In our first meeting with Mr. Wong on Thursday, we realized that he found this arrangement unacceptable, as he claimed the power, or energy, would travel from his right hand through the box into the left hand of the subject and keep going out the other side into the right box. Banachek, Jamie, Chip, Mr. Wong and I all walked around the room for some time with our hands on our chins, voicing ideas, arguing the merits of each, going back to the drawing board and so on. Then the idea came up that the screen or partition, by which time it was agreed could be made from cardboard, could be set at an angle, so the energy would miss the other hand of the subject as it was being projected. We also toyed for a long time with the idea that Mr. Wong and a placebo claimant, i.e. someone with no special powers, would approach the subject at the same time, one working on the right hand, the other on the left. These ideas bounced around the room for the next couple of hours as we changed this and that, drew diagrams, and argued the small points. All this goes to remind us of how complex and involved these preliminary tests can be, especially when you consider that we were also constructing a live performance for an audience. But the overriding consideration during this whole process was to ensure that Mr. Wong was in agreement and comfortable with what we were suggesting to him. He, like any other claimant at this stage of the planning, had the right to veto what we put forward. I must say we found Mr. Wong to be very helpful and polite throughout, and was understanding of what we were trying to achieve. Somewhere along the way, the idea developed that we only use the right hand of the subject, and Mr. Wong and our placebo claimant should take it in turns. This met with universal agreement, as it eliminated quite a few problems. We also agreed that 2 ping-pong balls, one white, the other black, placed in a bag and shaken, would be used to determine at random who would approach the subject first and second. By now we all needed a rest, and it was agreed we would meet the next day when Mr. Wong could start meeting and assessing possible subjects for the test. I headed back to my room and rewrote the $1 Million Challenge document with the new conditions worked out in our meeting, complete with new diagrams. Friday arrived and Tam was in full swing. Hundreds of people from all over the world with many old friends to meet again. Mr. Wong arrived at the reception desk around 12:45 and was escorted to the press room, which we commandeered for the next few hours. Soon Kristen brought in the first group of possible subjects from the Las Vegas area, all of whom were very keen to help. In the week before Tam, Kristen went about finding these subjects by placing flyers at yoga studios, Whole Foods, mystic bookstores, psychic reading places, crystal dealers, and even used Craigslist. Mr. Wong had mentioned that people who practice meditation, etc., are more likely to be empaths for his energy. But Mr. Wong was also happy for us to use TAM delegates if we wanted. The next 3 hours were spent with Mr. Wong slowly and methodically testing each subject. We even went to the trouble of blindfolding and placing industrial headphones on the subjects to make sure that they and Mr. Wong were comfortable with this extra layer of security. Then Banachek, or I, and Mr. Wong would ask them if they felt any sensation in their hand when the energy seemed to be transmitted. Some said yes, some said they weren't sure, most said no. Mr. Wong had the final say as to whether an individual was deemed acceptable, and they were asked to return for the live show. Noticing that Mr. Wong's right hand was getting very close to the box, it was agreed that a line be drawn to form a 6-centimetre barrier. A great deal of time was used to work out just how long Mr. Wong needed to concentrate between each subject in order for him to feel his energy levels were just about right. It was during this session that it was decided that he would have exactly 1 minute to work on each subject, which was more time than he really needed. We also had to agree on how much time should elapse if we were to use the same subject more than once. Other details included where to put the curtains, who should stand where, and do what. I videotaped the entire session for the archives with the permission of Mr. Wong. One of the details that changed during this session was that the subject would face away from the audience instead of at right angles. The stage curtains would also be used to help conceal Mr. Wong and our placebo claimant, JBN Swiss, from the audience. A copy of the document was emailed to Mr. Wong for his records and comments. Saturday rolled around and once again we found ourselves in the press room with another group of possible subjects to be assessed by Mr. Wong. Yet more alterations to the tests were made as we learnt more about just what it was needed and who we might be using the following night. Kristen also took the opportunity to find out more about Mr. Wong's background for the benefit of the audience. Like the day before, this session took some hours and more of the protocol was fine-tuned. By the end of it, we only had 5 subjects with whom Mr. Wong was happy from the 2 days of pre-tests. More rewrites followed, with me making 2 versions of the testing plan document. One version was to cater for the possibility of using all our 5 subjects twice, giving us 10 tests. The other was a safety, in case only 3 of the subjects turned up on the night, in which case we would use them 3 times each, giving us a total of 9 tests. As it turned out, it was good to have a plan B. Finally, Sunday, the day of the preliminary challenge, arrived. All the members of the $1 Million Challenge Committee were very busy that day with talks or workshops, and it wasn't until late into the afternoon, after the last TAM talk, which happened to be mine, that we had access to the main stage to start constructing the testing table, cardboard screen, the box, and practice moving the curtains. A video camera was also installed at the back of the stage to capture for the record what would be hidden from the audience. Mr. Wong joined us during this time to inspect the setup and go over the final protocols, as did James Randi, who took great care to examine the stage. Delegates may be forgiven if they think they saw a strange flash with a yellow tie tearing up and down the Great Hall, laptop in hand, as I ran to see to last-minute loose ends, including finding a printer to make copies of the now many times rewritten formal document. All was ready. However, we only had 3 of the 5 subjects turn up for the test, so Plan B it was. We parked them in the service corridor near the main stage, had Mr. Wong wait in the wings, let the audience in, and the show started. Banachek and Jamie took to the stage to introduce the night. Then Chip came out and covered the stats and calculations. For Mr. Wong to pass, he would need to score at least 8 hits out of 9 trials. Kristen gave an overview of Mr. Wong and his claim. Then I entered the stage and, really, as it happened, had nothing to say. We then did a demonstration run of the test, with Brian Walker taking the part of the subject for the benefit of the audience, as they would not be able to see the vital part of the test. Maybe the most important procedure at this point was to have Mr. Wong agree to and sign a copy of the formal document. This made it clear that we were testing his claimed ability under conditions to which he agreed. Now Banachek, Jamie, Chip, and Mr. Wong went to the back of the stage, while Kristen and I stayed near the front. Subject number 1 was brought from the corridor, and I showed her to her seat in front of the cardboard screen and box. I placed her hand in the box for a few moments so she could get accustomed to her arm being at that angle. Banachek gave the word that Mr. Wong was ready. The curtains were drawn. I helped the subject with the blindfold and headphones and guided her hand once again into the box. Behind the curtains and unseen to the audience, Chip reached into the bag, pulled out one of the ping-pong balls, and trial number 1 was underway, with Mr. Wong or Jamie approaching the box. As I stood there on the stage, my mind ticking over the seconds, I looked over to Kristen and I thought, how come she gets a chair? The audience, as ever at TAM, showed great respect. You could hear a pin drop. Banachek announced when the time for session number 1 was up, and I walked over and told the subject. A few minutes later, we were ready for session number 2. When session number 2 was over, I removed the blindfold and headphones from the subject. The curtains opened, Banachek came around from the back of the stage and asked the subject, "Did you feel something during the first session?" The subject answered yes. "Did you feel something during the second session?" No. Kristen wrote a 1 on the scoreboard. Now Chip revealed who went first and second. As it turned out in this case, it was Jamie who had stepped up first, so this trial was a fail for Mr. Wong. The subject was thanked and shown off the stage, and the next subject sent in from the corridor. The same process followed, with resting her hand in the box for a few moments, then placing the blindfold and headphones on. Trial number 2, session number 1, proceeded as normal, but at the end Banachek instructed me to remove the blindfold and headphones, which were not originally planned, but gave our subject a slight rest. Then the gear went back on for the next session. When the time was up for session number 2, I removed the blindfold and headphones. The curtains opened, Banachek came around from the back of the stage and asked the subject, "Did you feel something during the first session?" The subject answered yes. "Did you feel something during the second session?" Also yes. We had anticipated this possibility, so Banachek then asked, "In which session did it feel stronger?" The answer, the second session. Kristen wrote a 2 on the scoreboard. Now Chip revealed who went first and second. As it turned out in this case, it was Mr. Wong who had stepped up first, so the trial again was a fail. Unfortunately, this meant the test overall was considered a fail for Mr. Wong, as he needed to score at least 8 out of 9 to pass on the night. Even though 2 first-up fails was always on the cards, it was still a little disappointing. In what I considered to be a sign of his sincerity, Mr. Wong was happy to answer questions from the audience. I ducked down to have a word to Randi, who wanted us to be sure that Mr. Wong received a warm applause, which is exactly what happened. As the crowd filed out, some people came up to question details of the test or to get a better idea of why we did this or that. One concern raised was that it should have been me and not Banachek, who asked questions of the subjects after each trial to maintain a double-blind aspect. We took the point into consideration as important should we have progressed to the full-blown challenge. Despite Mr. Wong's confidence in his abilities, choosing the subjects for the test himself, taking part in the planning and agreeing to the conditions, members of the $1 Million Challenge Committee and the TAM audience remained sceptical of his claim. The energy or power or force he believes he possesses was seemingly absent during the preliminary test and also failed on most of the subjects during the pre-tests in the days before. It is possible that any reported sensation is more likely to be a psychological effect or simply a consequence of the arm and hand being held out during the process, rather than a mystical, unknown power. I would like to thank the members of the $1 Million Challenge Committee for once again allowing me to take part in the event, and especially to Mr. Wong, who had the courage of his convictions.
Now on Belfast FM, we turn to the personal ads. Easygoing and confident Skeptic seeks other critical thinkers for fun, laughter and good times. Must be willing to apply logic liberally and a good listener. Expect something new and interesting every month. Come and meet me in Belfast in Northern Ireland. If this sounds like you, check out my profile on belfastskeptics.com. Music by Kevin MacLeod.
Welcome to A Week in Science from RiAus, bringing you the science you need to know. You've just made your way out of a really frustrating traffic jam, and you're looking around for the reason, maybe an accident or roadworks, but you can't see anything. So, what in the world just happened? Mathematicians use different models to explain these so-called phantom traffic jams. One popular model likens traffic to a flowing liquid and traffic jams to a shockwave. To investigate this, Japanese researchers put 22 cars on a circular track and asked them to drive around at a steady 30 kilometres per hour. For a little while, all goes well, but it takes just one car to slightly change speed to cause problems, making the car behind slow down further and the next car back to slow down even more again. The cars begin to clump together, and this clumping effect reverberates backwards around the track like a shockwave, even leading to brief halts at points. Theoretically, if traffic remains heavy, this travelling wave could just keep going and going forever. These invisible waves of congestion also occur in real-life traffic jams. They create a ripple effect which doesn't go away until all cars return to the same pace. To prevent a jam, you should maintain a steady speed, so no changing lanes, no slowing down to look at things, and using your cruise control. And you can always carpool or use public transport to reduce congestion in the first place. Another potential solution is driverless cars, which are better at keeping a constant pace and which can wirelessly communicate with each other to respond to changing traffic conditions. Mathematicians help too by improving the algorithms that control our traffic lights and predicting when and where traffic jams will occur. And now, 4 fast facts about pesky traffic. Traffic light timings optimise movement for the majority of traffic, meaning that if you're driving against the flow, you could hit a frustrating run of red lights. Traffic psychology studies show that women cyclists are given more space on the road than men, and you're more likely to let a car in front of you if you have passengers. Using theoretical physics to understand traffic congestion is creatively called jamology. And in 2010, a 100-kilometre stretch of highway between Beijing and Tibet came to a standstill for 2 weeks, possibly the greatest traffic jam in history. That's it for this week in science. Stuck on the maths about traffic jams? Go to the RiAus website where we have some links, riaus.org.au. Follow us on Twitter at RiAus and like us on Facebook. I'm Kieran Groom and we'll catch you next week.
What we want is some more evidence, please. Here's Jo Alabaster.
This is Jo Alabaster. I'm here at Skeptics in the pub in Sydney, and we've just had a talk from Richard Saunders. He's been talking about the JREF's $1 Million Challenge this year held at TAM, the preliminary event. He's been talking about how it's been designed and giving us a bit of a rundown on how it went. And joining me at the moment, here in the pub, we've got a little bit of background noise. I'm here with Ian Bryce. Hello, Ian.
Hello, Jo. How are you?
Fantastic. And yourself?
Excellent.
Did you enjoy the talk?
Oh, yes, very much, to hear about Richard's antics in Las Vegas. What an onerous duty it is for him to go there and pursue skeptical duties for a week. Fantastic.
Absolutely terrible. I hope that I never have to do that sort of thing. That'd be dreadful. Yes, don't get me to go there, please, Richard. My question for today that I'm asking people, what do you think of skeptical challenges? What sort of value do you think they have these days? The $1 Million Challenge or Australian Skeptics? How much is it? $10,000?
$100,000.
$100,000. I'm selling us short, I'm afraid.
Well, I think there are many benefits. One thing they say about skeptics is they're so scientific and technical and dry and humourless that it enables us to have a bit of fun from time to time. Once it's all over, of course, we've got to conduct the tests in a serious manner. Mm-hmm. And the other one is it brings our name before the media whenever we conduct a test and have some results to put out there. Another one, it connects us with the rich and famous. For example, our patron Dick Smith came along to our water dividing tests long ago in 1989 in his helicopter.
That's fantastic. I think I've actually seen a video of that. Is that out on YouTube, do you know?
Well, this was long before YouTube was invented, but I'm sure it's been put there since, yes.
I understand one of the Australian Skeptics sort of provisos that they've got for their challenge is that a claimant is willing to have everything reported and potentially go to the media. Is that the case?
Yes, we insist on that. Otherwise, there's no point in it. For example, if we tested someone and they lost and they said, we don't want you to publish the result, we've put in a rather large amount of work and got nowhere. Our whole idea is to find out whether there's any truth in the claims of pseudoscience and the paranormal and so forth. And all that relies on us publishing. That's what we do. We have a magazine in front of us called The Skeptic, which we've been producing for 33 years, I think it is. And that's we also have podcasts, as you can tell, and all sorts of other forums in which we send out our results in there. Mm-hmm. So being able to publish a test is very important, and that's why we always insist beforehand that they agree to us publishing the results, positive or negative. And of course, it protects them as well, because if they get a positive result, it ensures we can't deny it never happened. It's all been filmed and recorded and made available.
Certainly. How much work goes into designing one of these tests? Because I understand you've been involved in designing tests for Australian Skeptics challenges. Can you tell me anything about that?
Yes, it's usually quite a lot of work. And part of the problem is, the biggest problem is identifying a specific claim which they can do and which couldn't be done by other means. For example, we have many psychic readers who come and say, I can talk to someone and in 5 minutes I can tell you a lot of things about their personality and their future and their disposition and what they've been through in the past. And we say, yes, we've got many cold readers of our own who can do the same thing. Indeed. That doesn't prove anything. What we need is something that the man in the street could not do. And that usually requires something a bit less dramatic than looking them in the face and telling them what they can do. Usually it requires the people to be isolated, so you can't get clues of a visual nature. And that's why in Richard's test we had them separated by a screen. That's the minimum you can do, is separate them from visual clues. So getting agreement between the two parties is the most difficult part by far. They say, look, I always do it this way, why can't you test that? We'd say, well, it wouldn't be a valid test because it's not ruling out chance alone acting or cold reading skills. And that's why it's difficult to find something that can be tested.
Are people generally willing to collaborate with you on these tests?
90% of the time they are, yes. Mm-hmm. In fact, they're... like in Richard's talk, we found out that the claimant was very cooperative from the word go. It was clear that he believed in it 100% and would be happy to go ahead with the test because he believed he was going to win. We have had some other challengers who have been unhappy and tried to block us at every turn by changing the protocol. And sad to say, I suspect that they knew they were cheating, and they found out they had some prospective way of cheating, they believed, and hence it was because they knew they were cheating and they weren't sincere that it didn't go ahead. But we do find that generally, certainly the ones who are sincere are very cooperative, and we're happy to reach an agreement. But it can still take many months or weeks to reach an agreed protocol.
And how many people that approach you, what percentage of them end up reaching the point where they're about to take a test?
Oh, I'd say only something like 1 in 10 which reach the point of proceeding to a test or agreeing to a protocol. So there are many ways they can drop out. Well, they keep insisting on impossible conditions, or they keep insisting on doesn't contravene normal science. For example, reading someone face to face and telling you about their life doesn't work. And when I sat down a list of questions, for example, what country was this person born in? How many times have they been married? How many children have they got? Which suburb do they live in? How old are they? There are specific things with the right, wrong answer. Then they quickly drop out and say, no, I had more in mind. What I normally do is tell you whether someone is introverted or extroverted, and whether they have suffered a setback in their life, whether they know someone who's had a serious disease.
Yeah, all these very vague claims that pretty much can apply to more or less anybody.
That's right.
Especially with a little bit of goalpost shifting as well.
Lots of Barnum statements, yes.
Do you get, aside from people who claim to have psychic powers, what other sorts of applicants have you had?
Well, water divining and metal divining is more of a scientific nature. So we call that paranormal rather than psychic or supernatural. Mm-hmm. So that's one that I like, because in theory you could build a device that looked under the ground and told you what was normally hidden to the senses. The CSIRO have built many magnetometers and ground radars. I've been involved in some of them myself. So we have to rule out the fact that the person might be using those, and that's the sort of thing we can do. But if they did have a means of water divining using only a rod, then we'd be delighted, because imagine what it would do to the water resources of the world if that worked.
I always think it'd be absolutely fascinating if somebody did actually pass one of these and we get a chance to have a look at how things may work that we haven't been aware of until now, but not yet.
One of the most fast-rising areas is in energy, because, as our listeners may have noticed, the world is in an energy crisis, and our consumption of energy is growing exponentially, although it's been a bit dampened by the price of electricity, but that's steadily growing throughout the world, while the resources of coal and the ability of the atmosphere to absorb the gases is reaching a limit. So that means that there's a lot of money to be made through energy scams, and in particular claims for energy-saving devices. For example, something you plug in the PowerPoint and it halves the power used by your fridge. Mm-hmm. That's something that we can test. And a more dramatic one is things that you can put in your basement, and they generate electricity to power your house, and you don't even have to put petrol in them.
The free energy devices. Do you come across many of those?
Yes, quite a few. Yes, I've got a great collection of articles on that, and I've tested quite a few over the years for the Skeptic magazine.
I find it quite fascinating. I've actually noticed on Twitter a lot of people approach Dr. Karl pretty much on a daily basis claiming to have free energy devices, and his current approach to this seems to be to tell them just to go and make them and bring them out and we can test them. But before that, the claims, not so much.
Yes, I know. It's very sad. I've got a friend who's a retired engineer, which in fact I am as well, and he's turned his hand to a free energy device. Every year or so he invites me to come and look at his energy device. He says he'll reveal all to me as long as I promise not to reveal his secret. And he's way past retirement age by now.
What's he holding the secret on for? Yeah. What's he waiting for now?
Well, then, when I'm due to go, they ring me up and says, look, I thought I could have it working by now, but I haven't quite got it working. I'll give you a call in a few days when it's working.
Oh, dear.
And that's been going on for many years now. So,
do you think he might be having you on a little bit?
No, I think he's having himself on.
Well, thank you very much for joining me and answering some questions, Ian. It's good to talk to you. Thank you. And now I'm joined by Tim Mendham, who is editor of the Skeptic magazine. And Tim, what sort of value do you think that $1 million challenges and Australian Skeptics $100,000 challenge have?
I think that's one of the key issues, actually, that people say that they don't think the skeptics take themselves seriously or don't take the situation seriously, that they're just knockers, etc. These things, actually putting up money, is a sure sign that we are serious, because they're significant sums of money. And people do know they're out there. Now, some people say you're never going to give them money, but we actually do have it. We have it in an account. But what happens is that people then think the test is going to be too hard. People who never actually approach us are always saying, oh, they'll never give the money away, they'll create a test which is impossible to achieve, to succeed at. But one of the things that we do make sure, as Richard was talking about in his talk just earlier on, was that we have to make sure that the applicant, the claimant, understands the test, agrees with the test, approves of the test, and does so formally. And once they do that, they realise the test is above board. Both sides have to agree, have to be mutually agreeable that this test is a fair test. Without that, the test is off. So that impacts on us as much as it impacts on them.
Certainly.
So it's a serious thing. The money is there. The money is actually there, and we're very happy to test people. In Australia, most people who've come forward for tests have been water diviners, who we all regard as very genuine people. They certainly believe they have the ability. They just, under the circumstances, under the tests which they agree to, the protocols, they just haven't been able to do it. We have psychics, we have astrologers, we have clairvoyants as well. But water diviners come up most of the time.
And how often do you tend to have people come and apply to do the challenges?
I'm the front line of this. So people, when they claim, I first receive their claim. It comes in via email most of the time. And I would get one a week. From all over the world, actually. We have to point out that the test has to be done in Australia for Australian residents. We're not going to bring someone over from overseas.
Have you ever had somebody willing to travel over to Australia to do the test?
We've had people who have said they're willing to travel over to Australia, but they've never actually... You've never got them to clearly explain what their talent is enough for us to agree to do a test. I mean, we have to get that all sorted out before they made the effort and the expense. I mean, we point out that if they won the $100,000, that would happily pay for their expenses.
Certainly.
In coming here. But we don't want people to do it if it's a fairly sort of dodgy claim. And quite frankly, most of the claims I get in are so vague and so easily... some of them I can explain after a short email. That this has been done before, we've seen this before, that the method you're talking about has certain flaws. Look at this side.
What are the vague claims that you've been getting?
All sorts of things. Recently I had one who can move an object like a little propeller under a glass dome. Right? And we point out that there's all sorts of things that can influence that sort of thing. There's, I'm not touching it, but, there's all sorts of things. Is it a sealed dome? Are you nudging something? All these sort of things. There's various things, I mean, the tests have to be very clearly claimed, and the protocols have to be sorted out. But that's half the fun. Half the fun for us is actually figuring out what's a good test of these things when the claim is not very clear.
Certainly.
So people say, what's your claim? Say it clearly. What do you get out of it? This one that Richard spoke about, the guy has energy, but I'm not quite sure what he does with the energy.
Yeah, that was a bit confusing. He had energy. The energy didn't really have a specific
purpose,
name, or somewhere that it came from, or a purpose either, but it was enough to test.
I have had people who were very, very vague about their claim, but very insistent on getting the money. I had one person who phoned me up a couple of times and was incredibly abusive. I mean, probably the most abusive phone calls I've ever had in my life. Started off very nice, very polite, and within about 30 seconds was calling me every name under the sun that had 4 letters in it and everything. And I said, hang on, calm down. I hope you don't expect to get for a challenge this way. He needed the money. And therefore he was desperate to get it, and so he quickly got off on the wrong foot several times. Dear.
But generally, do you find people are polite? Or?
Yes, most of them are very good. Most of them firmly believe in their talent, and we're happy to test them as long as we can get a good claim, a clear claim.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much for talking with me, Tim.
My pleasure.
And now I'm joined by Ray. Ray has travelled even further than I have to come to Skeptics in the pub this evening. Where are you from, Ray?
RiAus.
So that's inland from Katoomba, 1.5 hours?
Yes.
Goodness me. Have you enjoyed your night so far?
Yes, very much.
Excellent.
Very good talk by Richard.
That's very good to hear. I'm wondering, regarding the $1 million challenge and also the Australian Skeptics $100,000 challenge, what sort of value do you think that these things have these days?
Huge amounts, because in science.
Mm-hmm.
They get put up before scientists and peer-reviewed and such and knocked down. If someone says that I can lift an ashtray or whatever it might be, you can reply to them, well, that's excellent. I know the perfect challenge for you. And then send them off to this. I've done that to a couple of people. Not people who can claim what they can do, but people who said, oh, yeah, I know a person that can do this. And I say, oh, well, excellent. There's a challenge out there for them.
So it's something to enter into conversation, to sort of say to people as a response to an interesting claim, well, you can do this, as opposed to just sort of humouring them on their claim or asking them more about it or discussing it. It's a diversion, perhaps, to tell people that they can go to the Skeptics.
Yes, but it's also saying that if these people can do what they claim they can do, they can actually make money out of it.
And be proven or disproven, as the case may be.
And the good thing is that Skeptics aren't out to disprove them. They're out to actually try and help them prove their claim.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think there's a general sense that if somebody's claim was proven to be true, it'd be fascinating. It wouldn't be a defeat for the Skeptics. What do you think?
It would turn the world upside down.
Perhaps literally, depending on what their claim was.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Ray.
No worries.
And now I'm sitting here with Eric. Hello, Eric.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Excellent. I understand you're actually visiting from America at the moment.
Yes, I'm here attending the uni, working on a master's degree while here in Australia.
Masters. Can I ask what you're studying?
Coaching psychology.
Oh, psychology. So, you might have something to say about some of the $1 million challenges here. I'm actually asking people today, what sort of value do you think that the JREF's $1 million challenge and the Australian Skeptics' $100,000 challenge have?
I think it provides a lot of value in the sense that you look at certain claims to understand whether they provide some efficacy or some truth behind the claim, and that it can help individuals in the general public sort of weed out some of these claims that are not true, and hopefully stop some of the money that's been spent
so it can publicise some of these claims that get made and actually publicise them rather than the claimants talking about them in the media. We're getting a bit of a more sceptical view and a bit of a testing going on there.
Right.
Excellent. How long are you in Australia for?
I'll be here till December. Only been here for a few months.
Yeah.
So only a few months more left to go.
Well, we're here every month if you'd be interested in joining us again.
Yeah, I'm definitely continue coming.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye. Now I'm here with Natalie. Natalie, what do you think is the value of the JREF's $1 million challenge, the Australian Skeptics' $100,000 challenge, or the skeptical challenges?
Well, the value for me is when I'm having conversations with people who have alternative beliefs and such, I don't have the scientific knowledge to be able to argue with them and so much. But it's great to say when they're confident in their own beliefs and they're adamant that they're true and such. And I talk to them about this challenge and I say, you know, it's available. And they say, we don't need the money. I say, well, yes, but you can use the money to donate to charity or whatever else you like. But if you're really adamant in your beliefs and you want to prove it, this is a way to do it because it's peer reviewed and it's done in such a way.
Do you find many of these people, do you think they want to be tested or they just want to make their claim without really having it checked on?
I don't believe they've ever taken it up about the challenge, of course, or they haven't even looked it up, but it's a fact of it's easy to just say it's there and give them the option. And it stops the arguments, because sometimes you don't want to spend all night arguing with people.
You can go round and round in circles.
Exactly.
It's wonderful to be able to refer people onto this circuit.
And the onus is on them to prove themselves, not
Certainly.
to me to have to, bash them against the wall saying this is the fact.
Yeah, no, that's very good. Thank you very much, Natalie.
Okay, my pleasure.
And now I'm here with Jason Brown, who I've been speaking to online for quite a long while, and I'm meeting for the first time this evening at Sydney Skeptics in the pub. Good to meet you.
Hello, Jo. It's nice to meet you. It's fantastic.
I'm asking people today, What value do you think the JREF's $1 Million Challenge and the Australian Skeptics $100,000 Challenge and all of the Skeptic challenges have?
Well, here's a thought. I don't know what everyone else has said, but I think I think it's look at us, look what we've got. Mm-hmm. Come on, bring it on.
Ah, okay, so a bit of bravado.
A bit of bravado. Good word. That's an excellent word. I think that's what it is. I think it's like, hey, look, science over here. Bring it on.
Swagger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Come on.
No, that's a different perspective, actually. That's very interesting. I think we haven't had that yet.
Oh, good.
Thank you.
I like having opinions that no one else has got. I'm one of them.
Oh, you're a unique snowflake, and I thank you very much.
I'm not really. I'm not.
Thank you very much.
Are you enjoying the Skeptic Zone podcast and wondering where you can find more skeptical information? Skeptics on the Net is an online directory for everything skeptical. It features listings for skeptical podcasts, blogs, people, local groups, and more. It also includes the SOTN blog, where people in the know write introductions to their favorite skeptical and pseudoscientific topics. Please visit skepticsonthe.net.
Grain of salt. Grain of salt. Grain of salt.
Let's all take this with a grain of salt. Here's Eran Segev.
Grain of salt now. Grain of salt. You gotta take it with a...
I'm here with Dr. Elizabeth Pisani, who's an epidemiologist, and she gave a talk this morning about AIDS in particular, HIV and AIDS, amongst other things. Elizabeth, can you give us a bit of an overview of what your talk was about?
Well, I'm interested that you said that I gave a talk about HIV and AIDS, and I'm glad that you said that, because many people still use the term HIV/AIDS with an implied hyphen maybe between the two, but seeing the two as really one epidemic. And I guess the point that I was trying to make this morning was that these are now two completely separate epidemics. And the AIDS epidemic is essentially, if not beaten quite yet, definitely on the wane. The HIV epidemic, on the other hand, is growing. And our failure to recognize the difference between those two things is one of the things that is making it difficult for us to actually address HIV effectively.
Obviously, we have some solutions now, the antiretroviral drugs that help with controlling AIDS. Why are we not able to control HIV in the same way?
Well, because HIV has become completely invisible. HIV is invisible. It only becomes visible when it progresses to AIDS. Now that we've got effective treatment, very few people are progressing to AIDS in any visible way. And what that means is that no one is walking into a bar with their face covered in Kaposi's sarcoma, getting thinner and thinner every week. No one is spending, as I did when I was in my teens, their weekends at funerals of friends, weekend after weekend after weekend. There's no visible face to HIV, and so people are not, A, as aware of it, and B, those that are aware of it aren't as frightened of it. Now, I would say that that's probably a good thing. You know, there's a reason for them not to be as frightened of it, because it's not as scary. So it's a pill a day. It's a bit of a pain because you're going to have that conversation with anyone you sleep with. Well, you're probably going to have that conversation. By the way, something you should know, I'm infected. But more and more people are not even having that conversation. What that means is that transmission is continuing because the private cost of being infected is actually very low. It's taking a pill every day, essentially. Now, that's something that I've done for 30 years. I've taken a pill every day so that I can have as much sex as I want without suffering the appalling consequences of promiscuity, among them pregnancy. So I've taken a pill every day to avoid that perfectly happily, and I think that it's a behavior that many people are perfectly happy to live with. The problem is that the public cost of HIV is still very, very high. So people are on expensive medications for life, and the risk of developing mutations and developing non-treatable forms of HIV increase with the number of people who are infected in the population and are still sexually active and transmitting the virus. So the public cost is very high, but people don't make decisions in their sex lives or in their injecting lives about things that are a cost to the taxpayer. They only make decisions about things that are a cost to themselves. But there was a time from the late 80s till the mid-90s where, particularly in gay communities in the Australian case, but also among drug injectors, people were exceptionally aware of the risk of AIDS and actually were changing their behaviour quite a bit because of that. So condom use rose to really remarkably high levels, and it's now sunk right back down again.
So do you find that the younger generation are less aware of the risk of AIDS or less conscious of it, perhaps?
Well, the point is there is no risk of AIDS for them. There's a risk of acquiring HIV, but they're not going to get AIDS because they'll get treatment. So AIDS has disappeared. So are they less aware of the risk of HIV? I think yes, because are they less aware of it? I don't know. Do they care less about it? Yes, because there is now no longer really any practical risk of AIDS or, and of a protracted ugly and very painful death in their early adult years, which is what used to happen.
Yeah, the Grim Reaper is gone.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you don't want to terrify people, I suppose, nowadays. But you do want to send a very strong message.
You don't want to terrify people, partly because there's nothing to be terrified of, to the extent that HIV genuinely is not, at the personal level, something to be terrified of. I mean, pregnancy is much more life-changing consequence of sex than HIV is these days.
I have 3 boys. You've convinced me.
Exactly. But I feel that we really have not found a way to make a case for why to avoid HIV. We go on telling people how to avoid HIV, but we haven't made a case for why to avoid HIV in a post-AIDS world. There is a public message problem, and the public message problem is in large part, I think, because the agenda has changed so radically, so quickly, that many of the people who are still in charge of shaping the message don't actually get the fact that it's changed. We're still so imbued with that whole HIV leads to AIDS, leads to death, therefore it's terrible, that we don't get the fact that it genuinely is not terrible anymore. From a public point of view, it's terrible. It's incredibly expensive to deal with. There are huge risks of resistance developing, and that would take us right back to 1984. But there's also, unpleasant consequences of treatment. There are issues of disclosure that lead to issues of, stigma does exist, although probably not nearly as badly as some of the dinosaurs believe. I really think that we need to have a whole new generation thinking about this disease. Out with the dinosaurs. So I'm going to shut up about it and leave it to the new generation.
So you consider yourself to be one of the dinosaurs? Because
Absolutely.
Because you sound to me like you're quite an original thinker. Definitely the talk today was not the kind of thing that I would have expected to hear from a public health advocate in this area. So
HIV transmission is hugely dependent on what we call viremia, essentially the amount of free virus in your blood and your genital fluids. And that is something that is extremely time dependent. So it's highest just after you first become infected, when you almost certainly don't know you're infected, and probably when you're in what I'll use the technical term, a slutty phase. So all of our models of HIV transmission tend to be structured around averages. So we have an average number of partners in a year, and we have an average number of sex acts with a partner, and we have an average proportion of condom use in those sex acts, and etc. But as I'm sure you know, our lives are not lived in averages. Our lives are lived in phases, and you can be in a long-term relationship for a long time, and then it breaks up, and then you go and you hit the clubs and you play the field for a bit, and you may turn over more partners in that 3-month period than you have in the previous 4 years. And then you settle down again, and then, you have another slutty phase. It's in those slutty phases that you're most likely to contract HIV, and it's in those slutty phases that you're most likely to pass on HIV, because you're having a large number of partners in a short period of time when you're likely to be highly infectious. So by the time you're out of your slutty phase and in your stable relationship, you've probably your antibody response has kicked in, you've brought down your viral load, and you're much less likely to pass it on. So there's much less transmission in long-term stable partnerships than there is during the period of rapid turnover for virological reasons, as well as for the reasons of mathematical numbers of partnerships. So what does that mean? It means that HIV transmission happens in settings where people are turning over partners rapidly in a short space of time.
Yeah. What about abstinence?
Abstinence works very, very well technically. Unfortunately, behaviorally, it doesn't work so well. So abstinence works perfectly for those that use it consistently.
Yeah. Not many of those.
In my experience, that's not many of those. And for those that are practicing that, I chapeau, and I'm sorry for you.
Yeah, I can't remember who said it, but there's a quote I really like, and that is that abstinence-only sex education is like just hold it potty training. So it may not necessarily work.
That's right. I mean, it does work technically, and you shouldn't diss it. For those for whom it works, great.
One more thing that I want to go back to with regards to circumcision. You mentioned earlier that you had the nastiest, or I don't remember whether nastiest was the word you used, but you used some word to describe the emails that you got from the anti-circumcision lobbyists, I suppose, as the most extreme. So can you talk about that a little bit?
I can't even. I've buried them in my hate mail file somewhere, I've always been really interested by this visceral rejection of circumcision. All I'm saying is, here's the science. The science suggests that lopping off your foreskin reduces the likelihood that you will contract HIV by about 60% in a high prevalence heterosexual setting. Now, that's all I'm saying. If you believe that that is somehow advocating for the mutilation of helpless babies or whatever, that's your problem. But so I now have a blog on nosocirc.org and other organizations that feel strongly about this, because I have no axe to grind, no scalpel to sharpen in this debate. I'm just saying that that's what the science is.
You have no penis in this game.
I have no penis in this game. I would say, however, as someone who doesn't have a penis in this game, that one of the things that amuses me about the circumcision debate, or the screaming match perhaps, that goes on around this, is that one of the things you don't understand, but circumcision reduces sensitivity for men, therefore you're reducing our sexual pleasure, etc., etc. Now, I'm a woman, and women are blessed, thank the Lord. Guys are always like, people who complain about discrimination against women always forget this, but we get the multiple orgasms. Thank you, Lord. So as a woman capable of multiple orgasms, the fact that your sensitivity is slightly reduced, and therefore that you're going to keep at it slightly longer, is not really a great problem for me. So guys tend to think always about their sexual pleasure, but if any part of their sexual pleasure comes from delivering sexual satisfaction, then a slightly reduced sensitivity is probably no bad thing. Now, I'm not going to give you the N of my study, but on the whole, circumcised guys are generally better lays than uncircumcised guys.
And on that very positive note, we will end this interview. Thank you very much, Elizabeth.
You're welcome.
Grain of salt now. Grain of salt, you gotta take it with a...
Hey, this is Jay Novella from the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe podcast. Did you know that there are thousands of skeptical reports, interviews, and investigations going back to 1981, free to download? Just visit www.skeptics.com.au. Click the publications link and enjoy almost every back issue of The Skeptic, the journal from Australian skeptics. You can also subscribe online and get the latest digital or hard copy of this, the world's second oldest skeptical magazine. That's www.skeptics.com.au or just Google Australian Skeptics.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. Don't forget the Australian Skeptics National Convention is coming up. And you can check out all the details at convention.skeptics.com.au. And it kicks off on the 28th of November this year, 28th, 29th and 30th of November. Really looking forward to that. We're going to have a lot of international guests, including the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe crew. Can't wait to see them. Dr. Carl Kruseniski and all sorts of other people. Dr. Rachel will be giving a talk, of course. And I think the convention committee have been hinting to me that they're going to be announcing some more guests very soon. That should be really exciting. Now, our good friends at the Victorian Skeptics have let me know that they have arranged a dinner with Lawrence Krauss. And this is happening on the 29th of August. Details at vicskeptics.wordpress.com, but the blurb says the Victorian Skeptics are pleased to announce a special event featuring cosmologist Lawrence Krauss. Lawrence is presenting a talk entitled An Update on Cosmology and Thoughts on Education. Lawrence is well known for his critical thinking and promotion of science. The dinner and talk will be held at the University of Melbourne's Graduate House. And they're telling me tickets are already selling fast. An extra special event, again, if you're in the Melbourne area or if you're in Victoria, you might want to check this out. In fact, I think you should. vicskeptics.wordpress.com for all the details. That date again is the 29th of August. A dinner and a talk with Lawrence Krauss. And a little update on the Vaccination Chronicles DVD. Wow, it's raw. Well, I guess it is finished, in a manner of speaking. It's a work in progress. I've put out a few review test copies out there for people to try on their systems to see if the sound works and all the links work and the subtitles look about right. I'm getting more subtitles every week, which is really cool. Then I can just add them progressively. I think I'm getting Russian soon. Still very interesting work. But as soon as that's more or less ready to go out there and finished, I'll let you know. And then I'll just have to work out a way you can get a copy of that DVD. And when I work that out, it won't cost very much because the only thing I'm interested in is just recouping production costs, which aren't all that fantastically big. Anyway, more news about that, hopefully next week. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders, signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to The Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.
The Skeptic Zone.